I'm Brian Lilly. Do we really believe in free speech? That is the topic of tonight's byline. We heard it, we saw it, we continue to be told, "Je suis Charlie." That was the reaction of those saying, "We stand with free speech," in the wake of the terrorist attacks on the Paris offices of the magazine Charlie Hebdo. Yet today, it's a lot of warning signs that free speech is not actually valued. We've got comments by Pope Francis as he travels in the Philippines. Now, Pope Francis has condemned the terrorist attacks, but asked about freedom of speech and freedom of religion, he said this: "You cannot provoke, you cannot insult the faith of others, you cannot make fun of the faith of others." Well, actually, I can and I will. I say that as a Catholic. I'm sorry, Pope Francis, but you are completely wrong on this. You cannot defend free speech as you've done and hold this position. Use some of that famous Jesuit logic here. Then we've got the court decision out of British Columbia, the one that essentially allows the University of Victoria and its Students Association to say you can block pro-lifers from exercising their right to free speech on campus. The students wanted to have an event raising awareness on their views of abortion. The Students Association declared that pro-life activities amounted to harassment, so they wouldn't allow it, and any students that did participate were threatened with sanction. The BC Civil Liberties Association, a staunchly pro-choice, pro-abortion group, was appalled. So they decided to help the student, Cameron Cote, and the student group and take the case to court. Here's a quote from their news release. "The BC CLA has a long history of pro-choice advocacy and action. We regard safe, effective access to abortion as a civil right, both as a matter of democratic principle and a fixture of Canadian law. However, the BC CLA also stands strongly for the right of students to express themselves in the university of an environment, whatever their opinions." The court, as it turned out, decided that the charter doesn't apply to the university because it's a private institution. You know, I'd like to see a private business get away with that on an issue that the progressive left loves. It simply wouldn't happen. But what really has me bothered today on the free speech issue is the news that the Halifax Police Service are investigating a group of Dalhousie University dentistry students over comments they made on a private Facebook page. The statements the men were alleged to have made were crude. They may be sexist or misogynist, we're told. We haven't seen them all, but what we're talking about here are words, not actions. But I've not heard one claim that anyone acted on these sick jokes about having hate coitus or anyone using chloroform on dates. National Post columnist Christy Blatchford described the men who were part of this private Facebook page this way. She said, "They appear to be a group of profoundly unimaginative men, a little too pleased with themselves, not to mention their fabulous penises." Yet, in Blatchford's view, these men are being investigated for thought crimes. That's how she puts it. And I think she's right. You don't have to like or agree with what these men were writing, and if you are their parents or friends, you might want to have a word with them. But a police investigation? It seems a bit much, especially, as I said, a week after the whole Western world seemed to be declaring "Je suis Charlie" after the newsrooms and, well, reporting on this story. Well, it's breathless. Look at this, look at this, look at what they said at Dalhousie. They should be punished. A week ago, they were all in favor of free speech, posting pictures of themselves in solidarity with the ideal of free speech. Now, people investigated by police for words, not actions. We shouldn't be overly shocked at this. Canada has a shaky relationship with free speech. Whether it be my friend Ezra Levant being prosecuted for publishing the original Muhammad cartoons in the Western Standard, to Mark Stein being prosecuted by the human rights apparatus over a book excerpt, to pro-life students being shut down or arrested at various universities, or, most shockingly, horribly, the head-shaking court decisions that have come out, including the 2013 Supreme Court decision on Bill Whatcott. Now, Bill Whatcott had published a flyer that some found hateful. Whatcott said he was relying on free speech and the truth. In their decision upholding his conviction, look at what the Supreme Court said. They said neither free speech nor truth mattered. Justice Marshall Rothstein wrote this: "I agree with the argument that the quest for truth is an essential component of the marketplace of ideas, which is itself central to a strong democracy." Now, it's a pretty good paragraph, or at least the start of a paragraph, and it sounds good because the quest for truth is part of a strong democracy. But unfortunately for Canadians who value truth, Rothstein went on to say that doesn't mean you can't face sanctions for uttering words that are true. Same paragraph, he wrote, "However, I do not think it is inconsistent with these views to find that not all truthful statements must be free from restriction. Truthful statements can be interlaced with harmful ones or otherwise presented in a manner that would meet the definition of hate speech. I'm sure, like me, your mother tried to teach you to be nice. Maybe you even heard the old maxim, if you can't say anything nice, don't say it at all. But I doubt when your mother warned you those words, when she spoke those words to you, that she was thinking that you could face jail time or a police investigation, that you could be sanctioned by your school or shot for saying the wrong thing. Now, I've been bothered by all the Johnny-come-lately friends of free speech since just after the Charlie Hebdo shootings happened and people began standing in solidarity. I knew it wouldn't last. Unfortunately, this week's headlines prove that last week's headlines were full of lies. And that's the byline.
We're really disappointed. I mean, the big point for us in trying to bring this case was to say that universities, when they're doing things like deciding who can book spaces and conducting a whole range of non-academic activities, are bound to respect people's human rights and indeed are bound to respect the Charter. What the judgment has said today is that the university isn't covered by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and all of these kinds of things, and apparently it's okay for a university to deny the right to hold an assembly to certain student groups.
Tonight's top story, no such thing as free speech on a university campus, at least not if you hold certain views. That was the reaction from the BC Civil Liberties Association after the Supreme Court of British Columbia ruled that university property is not a free speech zone protected by the Charter. Marnie Sukoff is the Executive Director at the Canadian Constitution Foundation. She joins us now from Toronto. Marnie, are you surprised by this decision, or are you saying, no, the judges got it right?
I'm surprised and disappointed, as in the clip that you heard. I think we'd like to think that universities, out of all places in society, would be the one place where free speech would be valued the most, where people are learning about different ideas, are supposed to be open to hearing different opinions, being open to dissenting opinions, minority opinions, all those things. It's supposed to be about learning tolerance in a way, is by hearing lots of different points of view. All of that, it's very disappointing to hear that despite those hopes, we have now heard that it is legally okay for a university to say to one student group, because they have a very unpopular point of view, that it's okay to not allow them to book a room or to book a space to hold the demonstration that they want to hold. It's not what the lesson that you're teaching students there is a really unfortunate one that they are now going to be taking into the rest of their lives when they graduate university and are going about as Canadians who are employed and working and living in Canadian society.
Look at so many of the big civil rights issues that have been fought over the last several decades. Many of them found their heart and soul in university campuses, and they started out as unpopular opinions. Can you imagine if these same speech codes had been applied to past rights, whether it's we're talking about women's rights or gay and lesbian rights or the push for abortion? If they had just said, no, we're not going to allow you to even speak about those opinions, well, maybe some of these things wouldn't have changed. But was that good or bad? Aren't we supposed to have the marketplace of ideas?
Well, absolutely. That's the whole idea. And in fact, we have seen throughout history many occasions where people have not been allowed to express opinions that were considered either disgusting or offensive or any manner of adjective that you can imagine, where people just disagreed, where most people disagreed, and it was thought, well, then you shouldn't be allowed to say it. And I don't think we would have had the progress we've had in the civil rights movement, as you said, ironically enough, in gay and lesbian rights.
But people that support those issues now are the ones doing the silencing.
Well, they are. I mean, this is always the danger with freedom of speech. It's very easy to defend freedom of speech when you're defending something that you personally happen to believe in or something that doesn't particularly bother you. And that's not the point where freedom of speech is really, that's not when freedom of speech needs champions. When it needs champions is when you're talking about opinion that most of society, that the majority of people out there have decided is not the right point of view. If you don't allow that dissent, though, if you don't actually allow the debate and you don't allow people to sort of have the ideas clash, you run into a couple of problems. I mean, John Stuart Mill is one of the greatest defenses of freedom of speech, and he pointed out not only could you be wrong, which is always a possibility, but what you also risk is you risk getting into a situation where what you're saying, even if the majority is right, it just becomes dogma. and people don't actually think about it and think about whether it's right or wrong. It's just drilled into them, and that's what they repeat over and over again, without a clash with different ideas, without actually being able to have a debate and see whether there are reasons why you're choosing to hold one view or the other. You're doing nothing more than just repeating an orthodoxy, and that is not healthy, and it's certainly not healthy on a university campus of all places.
All right, we're almost out of time. University campuses are publicly funded. They might want to call themselves private institutions. I don't think private business would get away with a lot of this, by the way, but they get a lot of government money, whether it's from the feds or the province. Do you think this will stand if it is appealed?
It'll be interesting. I don't know, but I don't think it should. I think you're right that we're not even talking about a private university here. We're talking about a public university where members of the boards of governors are actually appointed by government. There's a lot of government involvement here, all of which makes me think that it would make much more sense if the charter were actually to apply, but we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this go to the Supreme Court for them to decide.
Right. Well, given their decision in the Whatcott case, I'm not optimistic there, but I'll try and be hopeful. Marnie, thanks so much.
Thanks very much.
Email us your thoughts, byline@sunmedia.ca.